What's going on, everyone? Thanks for joining. Today, we're going to get into our preview show for the SMX playoffs. So what I want to go ahead and do for you guys today is just get you all up to speed, get you guys understanding the structure, how the seeding works, how the points are going to work, who is going to be in, who's going to be out. We already have some guys inside the top 20 who are not going to be able to race the playoffs. So I'm going to let you guys know exactly how that's going to work out. We also have a lot to go over as far as the track build. It looks pretty crazy on the track map, and we've also seen them start building it, so we're going to go over that. And we'll also go over what these guys are playing for, not only the overall payout, but also the purse for each round. So first up, let's go ahead and get the structure of SMX out of the way. I know it's our second year doing this, so we do have a general understanding of how it works, but it's still fairly complicated when compared to supercross or motocross. So going into the playoffs, the top 20 in overall points are going to be seeded directly into the main events. First place in seeding will start off with 25 points, and last place, 20th, will have 2. So it's basically normal championship points, just seeded for the top 20. Assuming all 20 seeded riders are able to show up, then 2 additional spots will be available through the last chance qualifier. If there are any people missing from the top 20 seeded riders, then additional spots will become available in the LCQ. As far as the LCQ goes, it should be numbers 21 through 30. In the overall point standings, so it's only a 10-rider LCQ. There is also a contingency for anyone who is outside the top 30 that has a race win during the season can also compete in the LCQ, which should only apply to Austin Faulkner, so I don't necessarily know that that's going to become a factor, but it is in there. As far as race day, the LCQ will be run first, and then based off of the point seeding, lane choice will be given. Then 2 main events, or 2 motos, depending on what you want to call them, will be run. They'll both be 20 minutes plus 1 lap. So here we start to see our first signs of a hybrid format. We have the 2 moto format from motocross, and then the 20-minute plus 1 from supercross. Now, one thing that is pretty important that I want you guys to know is that it's going to be an Olympic style scoring. So first place will get 1 point and second will get 2, and so on. And then there will be an overall winner and second place and so on. So with that being said, championship points will only be paid out 3 times, not in each individual moto. Personally, I feel like this is a pretty big missed opportunity because you will see some guys settle just a little bit when they know their overall position is already secured in moto number 2 instead of fighting for those additional moto points. But either way, that's the format. So at round number 1, the championship points will be normal, with first place getting 25 points. Then at round number 2, the points will be doubled, so first place will be worth 50 points. And at round number 3, it'll be tripled, so 75 points to the winner. So with the last round being triple points, mathematically, a lot of guys should still be in the fight going into the final round. And with it being a 2-moto format, it really could come down to the wire. Even if you have the points lead going into the final round and are able to win moto number 1, you still can't count yourself as the champion until you finish up that moto number 2 solid. Now let's move on to exactly what these guys are racing for, starting off in the 250 class. At each individual race, there is a purse to all 30 riders. So everyone who races will get paid to some extent, and the purse is significantly higher than any of the other rounds during the normal season. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like, first place will get $50,000, second will get $25,000, third will get $12,500, fourth place will get $5K, and then fifth will get $2,700. Again, that is the purse for each individual round, and it does go all the way to 30th place. Then as far as the overall payout, if you are able to bring home the title, you will win $500,000. Then second will bring home $250,000. Third will get $150,000, and even fourth will bring home 6 figures with $100,000, and rounding out the top 5 will get $50,000. So there's a lot to play for in that top 5, especially with all of the top 4 getting 6 figures. And you'd have to imagine if you're able to finish off in the top 5 overall, you probably got top 5s in the round, so you probably brought home at least another 6 figures there, especially once you figure in team and sponsor bonuses. Moving on to the 450 purse, it's basically double what the 250 purse is. So first place will get $100,000, second will get $50,000, third will get $25,000, fourth will get $10,000, and fifth will get $5,000. Now again, this does go all the way through the top 30, so everyone will be getting paid to some extent. And as far as the championship overall payout, it is once again basically double, at least at the top, with first place getting $1 million, second getting $500,000, third $250,000, fourth $200,000, fifth $150,000, 6th, 135,000, 7th, 120,000, and 8th, 100,000. So the top 8 will all get a 6-figure payout. So now that you guys know the payout, let's move on to the 250 class and what that is going to look like as far as where's everyone in the standings, who's in, who's out. So I'm not going to go over every single rider in the top 30, but I will put that on the screen and we will talk about some of the key points. So at the top, obviously your number 1 seed is going to be Hayden Deegan. And then behind him, we have Levi Kitchen and Tom Bial. But one thing I want to talk about is Joe Shimoda. So he's right there in 4th. He almost won last time, and he should be coming back. It looks like he's back on the bike. Obviously, he did suffer that broken collarbone, but once again, he should be back. Then we have Chance Hymas, Jordan Smith. There was a few laps there where it looked like Jordan Smith could maybe even win at the Coliseum, and he was coming on pretty strong at the end of motocross, so I wouldn't count him out either. He could definitely be a dark horse. Then if you look just outside the top 10, in 11th, we have Ty Masterpool. So interesting to see that. He almost made it inside the top 10 just racing motocross, and we did see him have a few pretty rough motos, so definitely impressive to see him make it up this far. The concern with him has always been his supercross. He's clearly excelled at motocross, so it's going to be interesting to see how he handles these SMX rounds. We saw him finish off pretty strong in the 450 class in SMX last season, and that was with appendicitis, but the depth of this 250 class this year is really strong. Ty did secure a deal for next season, so I don't look for him to be taking any major risks out there. But at the same time, you know he wants to prove he can ride Supercross, and you know he wants a good payday. So I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on Ty Masterpool. Another thing worth noting is we have our defending Supercross champion in RJ Hampshire all the way back in 13th. So he is going to have an initial points deficit behind these guys, but he's still well within striking distance, especially with triple points at the end of the season. Then I also want to talk about the last 2 guys at the bottom, which is Garrett Marchbanks, who was able to secure his spot at the very end of the season by switching back to a 250 now on pro circuit. He's another guy who could definitely jump up in the standings. I would expect him to finish somewhere in the top 10 and maybe even be able to get in that top 5. And then we have another guy who will likely jump up in the standings and is going to be interesting to watch in Nate Thrasher. So he barely made the cut. Luckily, he did race the start of Pro Motocross, and that got him just enough points to stay in the top 20. Now, he has not been racing due to that collarbone break that he had, but he will be returning for this round in Super Motocross. One other important thing to note here is that your number 14 seed, Daxton Bennick, will not be competing in the playoffs. So what that will do is open up one more slot in the LCQ, which is pretty important because now instead of taking 2 riders from the LCQ, they'll take 3. So that does open the margin for error in the LCQ a little bit, and we could potentially have 2 factory riders in the LCQ with Cameron McAdoo and Seth Hamaker. We do know for sure that McAdoo will be lining up. Hamaker is a little less clear at this point. It looks like he's trending towards not racing. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see who can make it up from the LCQ. There's definitely going to be some guys from outside the top 30 in the LCQ. We know for sure that Phil Nicoletti will not be racing in the LCQ because he's now in the 450 class, so that opens up one slot. And then if Hamaker is not able to race, then that would open up another slot. So luckily, Mark Phineas will get a shot because he was basically tied for the last spot. But with Nicoletti not doing it, that automatically gets him in. And I'm sure there will be a few other guys from outside the top 30 in there as well. So it should be pretty interesting to see who can make it from that LCQ. Moving on to the 450 class, at the top, we obviously have Chase Sexton. And then behind him, we have Hunter Lawrence, and then Jason Anderson, and then Aaron Plessinger, then Justin Cooper, and all the way back in 6th, we have Jet Lawrence. So the first thing I want to point out here before we move on is just that by Jet Lawrence getting hurt in motocross and dropping down the standings just a little bit, he already has a 9-point deficit behind Chase Sexton, which is not a massive deficit when you consider there's 150 points up for grabs. But 9 points is still a significant amount of points, and it could come into play. Either way, as of right now, Chase's consistency has given him at least a little bit of an edge over the competition. Then as we continue looking down the field, behind Jet we have Malcolm Stewart, then Dylan Ferrandis, Justin Barsha, rounding out the top 10, Cooper Webb, then right behind him Eli Tomac, then Christian Craig. In 13th is Ken Roxon, 14th Shane McElrath, 15th Freddie Noren, all the way up to 16th Phil Nicoletti with only a partial motocross schedule, so shout out to him. Then 17th, Harry Koulas, 18th, Marshall Welton, 19th, Grant Harlan, and on the bubble, Kyle Chisholm. So as of right now, every single rider in the top 20 in the 450 class is expected to line up and compete. So that only leaves 2 slots in the LCQ. As far as the LCQ goes, there's probably going to be a few guys that are outside the top 30 that will be racing in that as well, as we already have Adam Cianciarulo in that outside the top 20, inside the top 30 range, and he will not be racing, so that already opens up 1 slot. And then there's some guys with some pretty big question marks by their name, like Derek Kelly, Vince Friese, Mitchell Oldenburg. So there could potentially be quite a few slots open for these guys that are outside the top 30. But even if they do race, it's going to be quite a challenge to get into the main event because we already have Dean Wilson, Justin Hill, and Colt Nichols in the LCQ. And they'll be lining up with at least 7 other riders. So it should be a pretty interesting battle for those 2 slots. So that gives you guys a pretty good picture of where everyone's at going into round number 1. And the last thing we got to talk about is going to be the track. And the track is looking pretty crazy. So we do have some footage of that coming up here. But we also have the track map, so let's start off with that. All right, so here we have our track map, and if you're anything like me, your first impression is probably, hey, that looks pretty good. And then your second impression is, what the heck is going on here? So let's kind of break this down really quick. So right here, we have our start, and it is a split start. And it's pretty interesting the way this breaks down. You have a left hand and a right hand off the start. So half the field will be making this right hand turn here, and half the field will be making this left hand turn here. And things are technically even as far as distance and jumps and all that, but obviously a left hand first turn is preferred for the braking side of things. But what the right side does have an advantage on is they do have a better angle coming into this turn here. So theoretically, the right side could be better in some ways as well. Now I am a little bit concerned about this merge here, because these guys on the left side, or the inside here, are going to be basically going this way, and then the guys on the right side are going to be wanting to take this line here. So we could theoretically have some collisions there, but these guys are the best in the world, and it does look like they're planning to have lots of space here for those guys to merge. So hopefully that'll work out just fine. One more thing I just want to point out before we move on down the track is that this single jump here is going to be hit going this way on the first lap, but for the remainder of the race, it's going to be hit going this way for the rest of the race. So it'll be interesting to see how that breaks down, whereas this single on the other side of the track, it will be always hit in this direction here. So depending on how that breaks down throughout the night, maybe that gives the left side an advantage. It's probably pretty insignificant because if you look at the actual track build, that single is pretty small, but just thought that was worth noting. So after they merge, they're going to come through this back section here. They're going to go all through this. Pretty straightforward. And then here's where things could get a little bit confusing. They're going to come back down the start straight all the way to this berm. Then they're going to come back down the start straight once again, cross over to this side of the start straight, go back down the start straight once again, hit this speed check wall jump right here, go over that. This will be the finish line jump here into a split lane between these 2 berms, into kind of like a little mini rhythm section here, into a rolling sand section, then into this section of the track here. It just kind of winds around into the only true rhythm section here, where you will land back on the start straight, hold it wide open, and reconnect with the rest of the track. So I think it's a pretty interesting track design. I'm a little bit concerned about some passing points on here, but we do have the split lane here, which is looking pretty nice. And I'm sure these guys will be able to find ways around each other. There is a lot of track to be raced, so I'm sure there will be some passing points. Here's a better look at what the rhythm section should look like here. So definitely some room there, and then that's going to lead into this wide open section here. So definitely some passes could be made there. I don't know that there's going to be many passing points in this back section here. Maybe just time to be made or lost if you're in clean air. Looking at it here from the other side, it is looking pretty interesting. I do wonder how they're going to build up this lip here to go over the first wall. And depending on how that works out, maybe these guys coming from this side can jump onto this plateau here and carry a lot of momentum, especially on the first lap, and get a really good drive going through here. If they can clear the guys coming from this side, that could be really interesting to watch. And then I just wanted to point out that this whole area right here is kind of like a tabletop or a built-up area to get over the dividing walls of the drag strip. And then it does drop back down here. So they do have some logistical challenges with building the track with these walls right here. So that's why you see this triple here, because they had to put something to go over these walls. So again, I don't really see any major passing points here. I'm sure these guys will find a way to make something happen, but for the most part, it's just kind of a winding back section. Still pretty cool. Obviously, this is the section they're hitting right off the start, so you don't want to have any crazy jumps right in this area. It's just a nice wide double, which I'm totally fine with. So overall, I'm pretty excited about this track build, at least on the track map and what we've seen so far from the videos of the track being built. There's only so much you can build on a drag strip, and I feel like they've definitely maximized that potential. Another thing worth keeping in mind is that these guys are going to be going a lot faster than what you would normally see on a supercross track, and there could be some roughness that you wouldn't normally see on a supercross track. So the suspension settings ideally would be a little bit softer, but we do have that rhythm section, so you really can't have your suspension too soft. So these guys are going to be running stiffer suspension, going very fast. Going to be interesting to see how that goes. Obviously, we already have a general idea based off of last season, but nonetheless, it still presents a challenge. I'm really excited for the racing this weekend and for round number 1 of the playoffs. Make sure you guys stay tuned for Saturday morning when I'll be posting our race day updates for round number 1 of the playoffs, where I'll get you guys all the way up to speed on everything you need to know as far as track conditions, rider updates, and everything else in between. If you guys made it this far in the video, I really appreciate it. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing. We've been doing this all season long and it's been going great. I really appreciate everyone's support. We're going to finish off the season strong, and going into the off season, we're going to continue to bring you guys updates, and we will be back at it once again going into next season. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.